Hi everyone. I wanted to give my thoughts and observations and eventually grade some of the E3 conferences since E3 is officially ending today. I think it's worthwhile to take a look back and kind of grade the conferences this year. I'm going to put some timestamps within the video itself, so if you want to see my observations on a specific conference, you can go ahead and click right there. But to start off, let's start off with EA. EA was, well, EA. If you've seen one EA conference, you've seen most of them. You have to deal with a lot of their sports genre, which, I mean, makes them a ton of money, which makes sense that they want to focus on that. But I don't understand why they just don't promote a separate EA like sports event because I don't think a particular large part of their audience that's viewing the EA conference at E3 are big sports gamers. But I don't know. It could just be easier on them to put their sports games and their other games together in one conference. That being said, it was a pretty decent conference this year. Battlefield 1 DLC looks great. They have the Russian front, which, personally for a history major, that looks great to me. Looks like they're going to be very truthful to the actual Russian front. They also have a new Need for Speed game, which kind of looks like a cross between Burnout and Faster Than the Furious, which, if you're interested in either the movie or the Burnout series, it looks like something interesting. They also had some indie games sprinkled in, which was nice to see at an EA event. Get Out the Prison Game Break, or the Prison Break game, seemed interesting. I don't know how open world that game is actually going to be, but it definitely looked very interesting to me. And last was Battlefront 2. And they really saved the best for last. Battlefront 2 looks great. They brought back the class system. A lot of gameplay was shown at the event. And yeah, that was about it. I'd give them probably a solid B this year. Not too bad. Pretty much baseline EA. The next conference was the Microsoft conference. And we finally got to see the Xbox One Scorpio. It is now the Xbox One X. And that was kind of surprising, especially since some news outlets reported beforehand that it was going to be called Scorpio. They weren't changing the name whatsoever, so a couple of news outlets got that wrong. It's at $500, but that was really no surprise. That's kind of what the analysts were saying. Again, just $500. That's a lot for a console, but if it's running 6 teraflops, as they're saying, and native 4K, which I still want to see actual gameplay of that, but definitely interesting. It was kind of a letdown in my opinion. They started off with Forza, which, Forza always looks good. They can definitely show a car game looking good on the new Xbox One X graphics. So, not too exciting for me, but if you like Forza, that's for you. Then it kind of went over to an indie game exclusive just showcase of games. And I think that's interesting for Microsoft, because we usually see a lot of big hitters at the Microsoft conferences. And in my opinion, if you were releasing a new console, you need to show what that new console can do, especially compared to your opponents within the video game industry. Sony has the PS4 Pro, so if you have the Xbox One X, you would think that they would be showing a lot more third-party games and how much better it looks on the Xbox One X versus like the PS4 Pro. They didn't do that. They focused on a lot of indie games, which I don't hate indie games, but for every one good indie game, you have 5 to 10 really shitty ones. So it's definitely a weird choice that they did that, especially focusing on exclusives. There was just this big push by them to focus on exclusives, which I get, but they really didn't show anything that I think would be core to the hardcore gaming audience or the core gaming audience. beyond that, they did show Shadow of War, which looked great. They also showed Assassin's Creed Origins, also looked great. I'm very interested in them. And then they they showed Anthem, which is BioWare's new IP. And while some people were very excited for this, I just didn't feel it. It looked kind of like a Destiny mixed with a Titanfall 2 mixed with a Division kind of feel, and it looks like it's just been done. Until I see more, I'm kind of gonna stay away from this game, and I'm interested why BioWare decided to show it at this Microsoft event versus the EA event, but whatever. I'd give Microsoft probably a solid C. I was hoping for a little bit more. We didn't really get anything new out of them. All around, you kind of a letdown from some of their past E3s. Moving on to Bethesda. Now, before I talk about Bethesda, I'd like to say I'm a huge Bethesda fan. I love Todd Howard. I love Pete Hines. So, that being said, this was a huge disappointment to myself and a lot of other Bethesda fans. Mostly because we really didn't get a whole lot. The other thing was they made the really weird decision to go on at 12 a.m. Eastern time, which I don't get why they scheduled it so late, especially on a Sunday, which makes zero sense to me. The other thing is, it was only like 38, some people are saying 38 minutes, other people are saying 40 minutes long convention, which for Bethesda, that's really weird, especially considering 2 years ago, the Fallout 4 gameplay was 30 minutes alone. So I kind of question why they had a conference this year, especially with Todd Howard saying in the past that a Bethesda conference won't be an E3 staple. They'll only come if they have stuff to show. And the big issue was a lot of what they did show we either knew was coming already, or it just really didn't grab the core gaming audience. There was Elder Scrolls Legends, which is a card game trying to go off the Hearthstone phenomenon, but again, really not capturing the core gaming audience. I mean, there were new announcements, the new Dishonored game, which a lot of people thought was DLC, but I guess it's a whole new game now. Interesting that they decided to go that route. And Evil Within 2, which we saw some gameplay for, but it also generally just it was mostly just this very artistic Kojima-esque trailer that we got, which isn't a bad thing, but I really would have liked to see more gameplay because I didn't play the first, and it really didn't grab me. And then they ended with Wolfenstein 2, which looks great. I love the first game. They showed a ton of gameplay for that, but that was about it. The big letdown was a lot of people thought Starfield, this rumored game that Todd Howard has been working on and the Bethesda Game Studios team has been working on, was going to show, especially since in their promotional material they showed a lot of sci-fi space-like activities in one side of the park beyond just the Prey promotional material. So, kind of a letdown. I know people took to Twitter and destroyed Pete Hines, which I think is really shitty because I don't think Pete Hines really had a whole lot of control over what was being shown. So, that's kind of disappointing. But, I mean, really, I don't see why Bethesda just didn't show off their games at other conferences this year. They really just could have done a Nintendo Direct and not had Pete Hines come out and talk for 2 occasions and then go back in and just show trailers, because I really think they wasted a lot of how do I put it? A lot of potential, I guess, that they could have shown elsewhere in other conferences. But, I'd give them a D this year. It's sad, but next year we're probably going to have a way better Bethesda conference. I think we're definitely going to see Starfield next year, which I'm excited for. I want to see what Todd Howard's been working on. The next conference was Ubisoft, and wow, I was not expecting what happened at Ubisoft. Shigeru Miyamoto came out and showed a new Mario Rabbids crossover, which some people had been speculating on, and I think it looks really great. It looks funny. It's Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle. It reminds me a lot of XCOM, which I think is interesting that they decided to do an XCOM type of game over anything else. But it looks funny. I'm glad to see Nintendo actually meeting with third parties and doing what they need to do. That's a great surprise on their part. Some of the other notable things that they had was the new Assassin's Creed Origins, which, again, looks great. They didn't show a lot during the conference, but afterwards they showed 30 minutes of gameplay, which, I mean, it looked wonderful. I started calling it Assassin's Creed The Witcher Edition, because it looks like they took a lot of what made The Witcher special and put it in Assassin's Creed. So, if you like that sort of thing, it definitely looks very interesting to me. I mean, it wasn't a perfect conference. You had The Crew 2, which The Crew 1 really didn't capture my eyes, and apparently it didn't capture a whole lot of other people's eyes because it didn't sell that great. And then you had Just Dance, but Just Dance was on there only for a little bit, so, I'm willing to give them a pass for that one. They didn't take up a whole lot of time. The other thing is they showed a pirate game, and it looked like a multiplayer pirate game. I'm curious to see if it's going to have any single-player aspects, but it looks like a lot of the combat from Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag was taken directly from that engine and put into this game. So I kind of called it Pirates Creed. I can't think of the name off the top of my head right now, but you can easily look it up online. And then, wow, they ended with Beyond Good and Evil 2, which most people thought we would never see the light of day. It didn't show any of the main characters from the first game, but it looked great. I'm really excited to see where they go from here. The first Beyond Good and Evil, it was kind of one of those games that didn't sell very well, but had this cult following, and a lot of critics really loved it. So I'm happy to see where it goes. Ubisoft, I'd give them probably a solid B. I mean, just like EA, they showed a lot of stuff, and it looked great. Moving on to Sony. So, Sony had some issues at the beginning with some of their music and mics not working. I was actually watching the IGN stream, and I thought it might have just been IGN, but I looked at some other streams, and they had the same issue. So, they started out with Horizon, the Frozen North, which looks like some DLC for Horizon, which Horizon's a wonderful game, so I'm really happy to see that. They then followed it up with the zombie game Days Gone, and honestly, it didn't really bring anything to the table for me. I think it looked like a typical zombie-esque shooter game. It kind of looked like a Last of Us ripoff, to be completely honest. It didn't really impress me. Next, they showed a remake of Shadow of the Colossus, which I don't think anyone saw coming, and will probably make a lot of people happy. I have not played Shadow of the Colossus, so I'm definitely going to pick that one up. And then another really weird thing was Skyrim VR showed at a Sony event, which, again, very weird considering Bethesda really didn't have a long conference whatsoever. You'd think they'd want to throw in Skyrim VR, but whatever. We saw that. Then they did a whole bunch of PS VR games, which, if you're into VR, that's great. I don't think there's a huge market for it right now, but I'm glad that someone's developing for it. Then God of War. God of War looks great. They had some story components within it. They had some gameplay. It really is interesting to me. I want to see more of that dynamic with Kratos and his son. And they mentioned his son being cursed, so I don't know if his son is the product of Kratos and a Norse god or some other god. and my computer is deciding to turn off here. Sorry about that. Um, but it looks interesting to me. I really want to see what they decide to do with that dynamic. I want to see how much of his son is actually playable within the game, and if he's going to turn into some sort of demigod. They finally ended it with Spider-Man, and that was surprising for me. This probably looks like the best Spider-Man game that we're getting in years. And it reminded me a lot of the Arkham series with the combat. So I think Insomniac really took a lot from what Arkham did well and put that into the Spider-Man game. I'm very excited for that. All around, I give them probably a B plus. It was a great conference. They didn't really announce anything new, which was kind of a letdown. I know a lot of people wanted to see more Final Fantasy VII remake or something new. We really didn't get that. No Death Stranding from Kojima, but I mean, for what we got, it was a good conference. It was games, games, games. And finally, the Nintendo conference, or the Nintendo Direct. It wasn't a conference because Nintendo doesn't do conferences anymore. They do their Nintendo Directs. So to start off, they showed a little bit of... I mean, there was a lot of Japanese anime-style games. There was Monster Hunter. I'm not personally into that, but I know there probably a lot of people are, so that's good news coming to the Switch. They showed a Kirby co-op game, which looked interesting to me. I love the Kirby games, and if I can play them with my friends, that's always plus. They said a new Pokemon title is coming to the Switch, and I think that's very exciting for a lot of people because we really haven't seen a mainstream Pokemon title come to any console, well, really ever. It's always been Pokemon Stadiums or something along those lines. So to really see a mainstream Pokemon title come to the Switch, I'm excited to see what they can do that. Then they decided to show a JPEG of Metroid Prime 4. That's all. I'm excited. I love the Metroid Prime series. They needed to make a Metroid Prime, especially after the Metroid, what was it, Metroid Prime, like, Federation Force or something like that, which was awful and just critically panned. So I really am excited for Metroid Prime 4. They needed to do this. This is something that's great. They also, after the conference, announced a new Metroid game for the 3DS, and that looks interesting to me. It's kind of this cross between 2D and 3D Metroid, so I want to see what they do with that. I'm also really interested to see how that's gameplay-wise is going to play out. Then they went on to a Yoshi Island-like game. Very cute Yoshis. That's kind of been their theme for the past couple years. Nothing new there. Fire Emblem Warriors, which looks like a Dynasty Warriors and Fire Emblem crossover. I love Fire Emblem, but I'm not a huge Dynasty Warriors fan, so that really didn't get me, but maybe I'll pick it up. DLC for Breath of the Wild. Looks very interesting. A lot of armor from what they showed off. Majora's Mask and a Midna mask, so I'm curious to see what they're doing there. Then they showed a little bit more of the Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle, which again, I think it's great that Nintendo is showing that third-party support because that's really where they've gotten hit in the past couple of years, just not having that third-party support. So showing that Ubisoft connection was very important. I'm glad that they showed that. Then they followed that up with Rocket League. That's huge. I am amazed that Rocket League is coming to the Switch. They also talked a lot about esports, which I never thought Nintendo would talk about esports. They talked about a little bit about Splatoon 2 and Rocket League, and I think that's amazing. I think Nintendo needs to support esports to make their console popular. So really happy to see that. And then they finally ended it with Mario Odyssey, and I have to say I am super excited for that. Mario 64 was one of my favorite games on the N64. Of the Mario games, I think Mario 64 is probably my favorite, and from what developers have said, they said it's going to be kind of like the next Mario 64. So I'm extremely happy to see it. They showed a bunch of gameplay. All the worlds look great. Um, it blew me away. That might be a system seller for me. I don't have a Switch right now, but the new Mario game, I might have to buy a Switch for that. Um, Really, this is the best showcase Nintendo has done for years. I was really surprised with everything, and I mean, just like Sony, they get a solid B plus. They didn't show anything that was new that really blew me out of the water, but um, this is what Nintendo needs to do. If they continue doing this for the next couple of years, I think they're going to sell a lot of Switches, and I think they're really going to be competitive again. And that's great because a good gaming market needs a competitive Nintendo. So, I think E3 as a whole this year, we really didn't see anything groundbreaking or anything that blew us out of the water, but I am really happy. I mean, besides the Bethesda event, I'd say it was overall a great year. So, maybe a stronger Bethesda showing next year, and if all the companies can top what they did this year, that's great. Um, if you like the video, go ahead and like it. You can subscribe if you want. And what are your views on the conferences? I'm kind of curious. Comment below. I'll try to get back to you as much as I can. I'm very busy right now, but I really want to hear other people's views on the topic. So thank you for watching the video, guys, if you're watching it.